Welcome to the Breaking 90 podcast, where we talk about all things sustainable fat loss. We take people on 90-day journeys to creating fat loss forever. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Breaking 90 podcast. I'm here today with my co-host, Jerrika Alex. We are the coaches of Breaking 90 Fitness. Thank you all for being here and listening with us. I hope you enjoyed today's topic.
Hey, Alex.
It's like that awkward pause. It's like, who's going to shoot first?
I won this one.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I have some exciting news that I can finally share on our podcast and share with you.
Oh my God.
I'm going to be an auntie.
What? Cool. Yeah. That is
Officially,
really exciting.
I've been waiting for auntie status for far too long, and I'm very excited.
How many siblings do you have?
Just one brother.
I thought so. Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, we're very, very close.
They got married last year, right?
Yeah, I guess 2 years ago, just very intimate, small, like 10 of us. But then the real wedding, I guess you could say, was last year. Yeah.
That's awesome. Congrats.
Yeah, I'm very excited. Thank you.
They going to find out gender or no?
Oh, yes. They're very, well, my sister-in-law loves to just plan everything.
That's like us too.
It's cool. Yeah.
we couldn't have not found out gender.
Yeah. So we're very excited. Everyone would have just found out on December 25th. So for those that are listening now, I can finally share it with everyone else.
So cool. Awesome. Congrats.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're going to love it. Do they live close to you?
Yeah. So I'm about 45 minutes away. So it's awesome. Yeah.
Cool.
Yes, definitely.
Awesome. What do you got?
So last year we had recorded, for those that are listening, we recorded a podcast on just ways we can measure progress. And, we dug into pictures and basically ways outside the scale. We did measurements. We talked about, maybe new lifts in the gym or being able to run with your kids longer. We talked about all those things. And we kind of touched on the scale. But what we did in that podcast was we talked about why the scale could be lying to you, or we kind of talked about maybe ways to avoid using the scale or ways that we want you to look at it elsewhere. But I actually want to flip this topic, and I want to talk about why the scale can be a super useful tool, and to avoid demonizing it, and how it can mainly be like a storybook in our health and wellness journey, especially as coaches. So I kind of want to help make the scale seem like a little bit more of a positive story and a positive experience for those that are listening, and how it helps us.
Can I start off with a little story here?
Yeah, I would love to.
So we have one of our clients reached out to me a couple days ago and has had I would say most people have had a pretty poor relationship with the scale up until the point that they started working with us. Most people step on the scale in the morning, and what that number shows them, how they feel like they look in the mirror, is going to have some control over the outcome of the rest of their day. And that's what we want to get away from. That number on the scale doesn't dictate our worth or how good or bad we have been. So this person came into this with a poor relationship with the scale, only wanted to weigh in once per week because that's what they were used to in the past. I believe with Weight Watchers, or I can't remember. So I'm not positive if it was Weight Watchers. And I think that there's certain parts of Weight Watchers that are a really good program. So I'm not shit talking Weight Watchers, because there's a lot of other programs I'd rather shit talk. So they weighed in. They wanted to weigh in once per week. I convinced them to do it twice per week, and we'll touch on that a little bit today. But they went out for dinner the night before their weigh-in. They knew they had high sodium food and they had a glass of alcohol, and they reached out and they said, "I'm really nervous for tomorrow's weigh-in because if it's up, I'm going to be so frustrated." And I responded that it is going to be up. For sure, it's going to be up. You're going to be retaining water. And there's nothing you can do about that. That's a completely normal cycle. And I'm sure we're going to touch on this lots today. And I said, so imagine you step on that scale tomorrow and it's up 3 pounds. Will that feel to you like you failed this week? And they said, yes, absolutely. And I said, okay, now flip this around. Imagine you hadn't gone out to dinner, you had eaten well all day, and I told you to eat 3 spoonfuls of salt tonight and then go to bed, and you were up 3 pounds in the morning. Would that frustrate you? And they said, well, no, because it would be the salt. Right. And it's truthfully, it's the same. It's a little different. Obviously, we're eating extra calories by going out to the restaurant. It's not just sodium, but the sodium is what's playing the largest role here. The sodium is causing a good chunk of that retention the next day. So I asked them, I said, so we don't know what the scale is going to show tomorrow, but I would wager a guess that it will be up. So say it's up 3 pounds. Do you think you ate an extra 10,000 calories since your last weigh-in, since this person's only weighing in twice a week? So it had been about 3 or 4 days. So that means over the past 3 or 4 days, do you think you've had an excess 10,000 calories? No, absolutely not. I've been on point. I don't even think I really went over in my nutrition. Okay, so regardless of what that scale shows tomorrow, we know we didn't eat enough of a surplus for the scale to jump. We know that the only possible solution is we're retaining water. They understood. We had the chat. It doesn't make it any easier to wrap our heads around this. We need to see it and see it and see it to start normalizing it. And if that's very difficult, so what I encouraged was a 3rd weigh-in per week for this person, so that we can start seeing it more and normalizing it more. But I don't want to take too much away from the story, because I know we'll touch on all different tidbits of this story, but that's just something that happened recently that I thought was worth mentioning.
That's exactly, yeah, all the points that I did want to touch on. And it's like you said, it's not going to make it easier, especially at the beginning. But it tells us that story, and it's teaching us about our bodies. And I like to almost see it in like a positive respect, in that I'm learning. Like, we love to learn, and those that are listening to this podcast, you're listening to this podcast because you love learning, right? You love learning about all these topics that we're going to share with you, and this is just another one of those topics. About now we're just going to relate it back to our body. It's like we get to actually understand what's happening with our bodies, because if we didn't step on that scale 3 times a week and we only stepped on it once, then it would be a very different story. And that's kind of what I want to dig into now, is if we are going to weigh, what's the problem with weighing once per week?
Yep. And truthfully, there's no problem. There's no problem if you never weigh in, if you weigh in once per week, or if you weigh in every single day. There's no problem with any of these if we don't let the scale control us. And we can't just say, hey, Jerrika, don't let the scale control you. We have to teach ourselves and educate ourselves around that in order to do it.
Right.
The issue with weighing in once per week is if you let that scale control you, if it plays mind games with you, and you catch yourself one week on a really, say you do every Tuesday, one week you weigh yourself in on a Tuesday and things are going great, you're super happy. The next week you catch yourself on a day of high retention, like this client that went out for dinner, somebody who's getting sick, somebody who injured themselves, whatever it might be. You catch yourself on a day of high water retention and you only weigh in once per week, and your scale goes up 3 pounds. It's like, oh my God, I'm no longer making progress. I'm now regressing and everything's going wrong because I only have one data point to reference.
And then what typically happens there is we fall into that all or nothing mentality, right? It's like, okay, well, now I'm going to throw in the towel because everything that I've been doing the last week, which I thought was really good,
Yeah.
other than last night,
Yeah.
was shit, and it's not worth it. I'm not progressing. So then it's like, okay, then they're going into, well, I'm not going to do anything. Or vice versa. They're like, oh, what I did the last week wasn't enough. I was eating, I thought I was eating in a deficit. Clearly I'm not. Now I'm going to eat way less. And then now we're just going to the extremes. So it's not, like you said, it's not a problem. There's no problem with weighing in once a week, but it's just knowing that you're going to have these periods of these spikes and periods of these whooshes. And then sometimes I ask clients like, okay, so on, we deal with a lot of women, and if you're listening, that I'm sure you know that by now. And women will be like, okay, well, this week I know my scale is going to be high because I'm retaining water, I'm getting my period. It's that time of the month, and they've accepted that and they're okay with it. And they have this more of this positive, it's like, oh, big deal. I'm not going to even stress about it. Well, it's like, that's just one factor that affects our scale. And because why are we so okay? We've normalized this water retention around hormones in female time of the month. It's like, well, let's normalize retention around eating high sodium meals, having a really, really hard workout, having a really high stress day. Like those are also normal things that are going to spike. So just because we seem okay with this time of the month, that it's like, oh, I know I'm going to be plus, like in my case, sometimes I see plus 8 pounds, 8 pounds, like that's insane of water retention. But I'm like, oh, no big deal. Just keep that consistency and keep drinking my water. And I know it's going to go back down. It's just reminding ourselves that there's other pages in our storybook. There's other reasons that it affects. And it's not just that one that we're okay with.
Well, imagine this scenario. Imagine you stay on track 6 days a week. You crush it. You crush your nutrition goals. You're doing everything you know you should be doing. And on that 7th day, you still stay on track. Other than one meal, you go a little bit off track. And imagine if that caused you to not be able to progress, if that screwed up your whole journey. So like we're talking, say 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, 20 meals on point, 1 meal slightly off point, you couldn't make progress. That would be the most frustrating thing in the world. Nobody would ever succeed, right? Truthfully, like if it was one little meal screwed up an entire week, this would be an impossible journey. That's how that scale feels to a lot of people. Because they're like, I know I crushed it this week. I just had this one dinner where I went out and I had a glass of wine and I had a little bit of garlic bread. Otherwise, I was perfect this week. And now the scale's up 3 pounds. That's the scale lying to you. You have made progress. You are crushing it. You just caught yourself at a really high point of water retention.
Absolutely.
Right? And so that's what we need to normalize. And so for a lot of people, don't ever weigh in. Like if you're happy with the way you look, the way you feel, the way everything is, don't use the scale if you know it's going to play head games. But I would rather you use the scale and understand it.
I think it's hard sometimes for people to use this scale and not have someone supporting them through those periods of extreme stress or all or nothing mentality. So it's like, I'm hoping that this podcast, if you're not working with a coach, hopefully these podcasts can help teach you about the body enough so that you aren't circling back to that. And if not, like that's definitely a really good time to reach out, because it's so important that it doesn't throw us that way.
Yeah. Agreed. I've said this lots to our clients. I wish there was a scale where you step on it, you don't see the number, I get the data. I like that idea.
I wanted to dig into that today because I want to say why it's important as coaches that we receive this information.
Totally. For me as a coach, like our main goal with our clients is to help you lose fat. That isn't only determined by scale weight. There's lots of factors that go into this. You can lose fat without that number on the scale moving, and that's important to know. But the more data you give me, the better I can help you. So if you're giving me daily weigh-ins and body measurements regularly and progress pictures regularly, and you're telling me how you're feeling and how your clothes are fitting, like all of this data is really, really important. But for the people who that scale really controls their mind and their outcome of the day, I would love that if I could just see the weigh-in without you seeing the weigh-in. That being said, I think it's really important over time that you learn to understand the scale and accept the scale too. And that's just putting a band-aid on a problem if you don't get to see the number.
We recently did a coaching call with a group of our clients, and Alex, you shared a bunch of just snapshots of clients, their graphs. So when our clients weigh in, it gets put on a point in a graph, and for those that are listening, you're going to see these spikes, what we call them. So the graph will go up, and then the graph might go down a little bit, a whoosh, and then it might go back up again because, like all the factors that we mentioned, and then they'll see a drop. So we showed all these different graphs to help normalize that, it's not just a downward linear trend, or it's not just a perfect downward line when we're experiencing in this fat loss phase. We're looking for the downward trend. So, it goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it might go down a bit more, it goes up a little bit. So we're looking for that average of that straight downward trend. But when you look at it from the grand, like you take a step back and you see all these little points plotted, it's like a zigzag of craziness. And that is normal. That's a normal, like a normal fat loss graph.
Yeah. If you zoom in on a week of your fat loss journey, it might look like you're not making progress or you're regressing often. You'll look at that narrow focus of that week and be like, holy shit, what's happening here? Zoom out a little bit more to a 2-week period. You could kind of see things moving in the right direction, but there's going to be some confusing parts. Zoom out to a month, it starts to become a little bit more linear. Zoom out to a year, it's like, oh yeah, this person's crushed it over the year. And you can zoom in on any week during that year, and there's going to be some confusing points where it seems like maybe they weren't progressing.
I think this is something that we use often with our clients when they're in one of those kind of struggling headspaces with a spike. It's like, if I were to show you just the first point on your graph and just the point where you're at now, would you be happy with your progress, right? Without seeing all the spikes and whooshes between, would you be happy with where you started and where that graph is at now? And like they say, yes, of course, like it's way lower or whatever it is. It's like, okay, so the in between is just part of your journey. It's part of the story. But it doesn't dictate, like, there's so much more to it. And we just try to remind them that. And I think that's kind of an eye-opening statement when they're like, hell yeah, I'd be so proud of that progress. It's like, okay, remind yourself that when we're struggling with these day-to-day weigh-ins.
In the moment, we all want progress faster. So right now, if you're listening to this, you want the progress to happen as fast as you can. But once you get there, you don't care how long it took to get there. And that's really important to think about, because you're going to get there eventually, and it won't matter to you if it took a year, 2 years, 6 months, 12 months. You won't really care. You're going to be proud of the fact that you got there. And flipping it around to now, you're like, how can I accomplish this as fast as possible? But that isn't the solution. It's never the solution to try to get it as fast as possible. Try to think forward to when I'm there, I won't care how long this takes. So these little spikes on the scale are normal and don't matter, because this isn't a race.
Yeah, absolutely.
So is there anything you want to add there? There's something else I want to touch on here. No? Okay. So for the people that weigh in once a week or twice a week, I would challenge you to weigh in as frequently. I don't want to say as frequently as possible, because I don't want it to become an unhealthy relationship where you're like packing your scale on vacation and stuff. If you're going away for a weekend, don't bring your scale. I don't care. Put it somewhere in your house where you don't have to move it, so you get a fairly accurate weigh-in. I don't care if it's the cheapest scale or the most expensive scale. It's a data point. Okay. It doesn't need to be perfect. It's a data point. We want to see over time that data point's going in the direction that we want it to. Any scale is going to be able to accomplish that unless it's broken. So put it somewhere in your house, use it when you think of it, and log that weight on a graph. If that's 3 times a week, that's great. If it's 7 times a week, that's awesome. We can get a really good average or a median the more data you give us, and it normalizes those spikes and whooshes. So basically what I do, if a client gives me 7 weigh-ins, I don't look at the 3 high, I don't look at the 3 low. Their weekly weigh-in that week is the 4th weigh-in, the one in the very middle. That'll be their median for the week. It ignores the water retention periods, the extreme highs and the extreme lows. If you do that every single week, it's going to tell you a much truer story than weighing in every single Tuesday. If you give 5 weigh-ins, take the middle one. If you give 3 weigh-ins, take the middle one. If you want to do an average, you can do an average, but it doesn't really matter. The problem with an average is if you have a day like Jerrika said, where you're retaining 8 extra pounds, the average will still get pushed higher. If you take a median, it ignores that weigh-in completely, which is what I would encourage you to do. Ignore that crazy weigh-in completely. It means nothing. It has nothing to do with how good or bad you've been. Don't stress that weigh-in. Okay. Anyways, that's the reason I encourage you to weigh in more often than not, and use that as data, not as a reference if I've been good or bad. I say this all the time, guys. We have no control over what the number on the scale says. We have full control over the actions we take daily that will eventually move that number on the scale. So you cannot step up to that scale and wish it to say any specific number. You have no control over that. It's going to say whatever it needs to say. It's going to say whatever you weigh. So don't let that control you. What should control you is what we have control over. I can control how consistent I am with my nutrition. I can control how consistent I am with my exercise. I can control how consistent I am with these daily habits. If you're knocking those out of the park, then the number on the scale isn't measuring how good or bad you've been, how successful you've been, or if you've failed. Eventually, if I do all of these actions, I know the scale will follow.
I just want to add to, when you do see one of those crazy spikes that come, after one of those days, it's not going to go back down the next day.
No.
Give yourself, like Alex said, focus on what you can control. Okay, so I see a spike. Okay, I'm going to take a second. I'm going to think about what maybe it could be, just to help understand. Sometimes we have no freaking clue what it is, and that's normal too. But let's say I was like, okay, I went out, I had a drink, it's close to time of my month, and I didn't sleep well. Boom. Okay, now I know I'm not going to let it control me. But as soon as I step off that scale, back onto what can I be consistent on again, once you get back to routine, it may take 3 to 5 days to see that come back down and to return to what is set to be your normal right now. And that is normal. So don't expect to come back down immediately the next day. It does take time, and we are all different. For some of us, it might be. For some of us, it might be 3 to 5.
Awesome.
Cool.
I don't have anything else to add. Normalize
Perfect.
the scale. Don't let it control you guys. It's one data point on your entire journey. If the scale's not telling you what you want to see, make sure that the other factors of success are in line before you try making changes. If you're making progress in your body measurements, the way your clothes fit, your strength, your progress pictures, you are progressing. That scale's not always going to show that right away. It eventually will show it. So before you're like, oh crap, the number on the scale is not moving, I got to change my plan. Look at these other markers of success. Am I making progress in these other areas? If yes, stay the course. If no, across the board, something needs to change.
That's a really good point.
Okay, we did it. Something I was going to add, but I'm going to actually use it as the tip because I think it's a good tip. There's an app out there called Happy Scale, and I think for anybody that struggles with this app could be really beneficial. So you log your weigh-ins in it every time you weigh in, and it paints a graph similar to what we're talking about with our clients, but it takes into consideration averages and medians. So if Jerrika steps on the scale, if Jerrika's been weighing in every single day and she steps on the scale that one day where she's up 8 pounds, it's not going to graph 8 pounds higher. It's going to take into consideration median, average, and it might only spike it up like 2 pounds as a result. It actually shows you like a realistic curve line over your period of your journey. So if you're doing this alone, I think that's a really cool app for you to use as you're logging weigh-ins. If you're doing it with a coach, hopefully your coach can help you navigate this.
Very cool. That's awesome.
Okay, well, thanks for being here, guys. Make sure you share this episode with anybody that you think it would be helpful for. If you can take a screenshot wherever you're listening, share it to your Instagram or Facebook story and tag us in it. That's hugely helpful. So we appreciate that. And as always, reach out if you have questions or if you have topics you'd love to hear in the future. Have a great day.